Good morning. It's Tuesday. Garland Nixon here with Laith Maroof. And boy, we got a lot to talk about. Let's talk. Garland Nixon here with Laith Maroof, and we got lots to talk about today. Oh, there's a few things going on, but before we get started, don't forget Laith's website is critical that you go there. It's freepalestine.video. freepalestine.video. They're doing great work. They're doing English language work, getting out of the getting information quickly and accurately out of the region. If you're just tired of the same old propaganda, you certainly want to hear from some people who are on the scene. They go to the scenes of where things are happening. They give you historical context. So it's fantastic. Freepalestine.video. Share that on your social media platform. Also, make sure that when you go there that you donate so you can help the cause, help them get going. And even if you can't donate, it doesn't matter whether you can or can't, make sure you share freepalestine.video on all your social media platforms, and on your post, put a note where you encourage people to donate. Laith, one or two things going on. Let's start here. Let me ask you this. Let's have a little philosophical discussion. We're going to get into what's happened in the fire from Hezbollah and various other things going on. But something I was telling Laith earlier, that I was listen to some things philosophically, to understand the issue of resistance and words like jihad and things of that nature that we're hearing floating around in the Muslim civilization. And the person I was listening to basically said this: the victory in resistance is over oneself, not the enemy. He said, basically, when the enemy, whoever your adversary may be, attempts to push whatever it is they're going to put on you, push on you, narrative domination, whatever, that the act of resistance, of fighting, is in fact the victory. And I thought that's an interesting concept, as opposed to a Western concept is, how do you win? You destroy your enemy, you destroy his whatever, you blow him up. And when I see interestingly, when I see Israel, and they're always hitting civilian targets, and then I see Iran, and then I see Hezbollah respond, and they're hitting military targets. It seems to me that there is a concept of, we don't want to just go randomly kill civilians. But again, with the philosophical foundation being the resistance and fighting back is the victory, that would mean, under that particular definition, that Israel's already lost. Your thoughts?
Yeah, so there's two things that you brought out there. So the one is the concept of jihad. And for English speakers that don't understand what the word jihad means, it comes from the word juhud, the root of it, which means effort. So jihad is struggling while you put effort into something. Okay, it doesn't only speak about military or physical fighting. For instance, when you're putting effort into a quest of knowledge, okay, you are a scientist and you're trying to find a cure for a disease, okay? What you're doing at that point is jihad. You are putting effort and struggling to cure a disease. And in fact, if you die, naturally or not, while you are trying to quest this knowledge, you are considered a martyr in Islam, a shaheed. You go to the highest heavens like somebody carrying arms and dying for justice. This is what jihad entails, struggling and putting effort into achieving good. Okay, so that, whether it's military or not, that's the concept of jihad. And therefore, when we talk about the individual and our responsibility according to the God Almighty of Abraham, God didn't put us on this earth supposedly And the only thing that we are judged on during our time on earth is how good we are to others. Okay, can we, bring justice to somebody who doesn't have justice? Can we, treat people correctly as we wish them to treat us, and so forth? So the whole meaning of life is actually this quest of achieving better with others and for others, not only for yourself, right? So, yes, if you are in the struggle of jihad, then you have achieved the meaning of life. If you are on the front lines in Palestine and Lebanon, fighting the injustice of colonialism and imperialism, whether you win or not, you won the afterlife already, right? So yes, that's the concept of it, and that's the meaning of life. Can you bring heaven to earth? Can you treat people the way that you want to be treated? Can you achieve the don't kill, don't steal, don't and finally, when we talk about comparing the Zionist behavior in the battlefield, how they're going in day out into Palestinian homes and putting on women's lingerie and filming themselves with it, and raping and rioting for the right to rape Palestinian prisoners and so on. What we saw since October 7th is the Palestinian resistance and the whole axis of resistance trying to showcase to the world what is the true Arab, what is the true Muslim. The West has for 100 years molded a ideal new Jew, the Zionist, and they basically molded the Jewish people into this awful thing that is now portrayed as representing all Jews. Also, in that 100 years, the West attempted to mold a new Arab, a new Muslim, that is, the oil sheikh, pedophile, womanizer, and or the Wahhabi death squad, head chopper, and so on. So the axis of resistance and then the Palestinians and how they are behaving, it's not only that they are actually abiding by the Muslim war rules, which is you don't kill innocents, you don't cut a tree, you don't attack a worship place, and so on. They're also doing it on video and broadcasting it to the world, destroying the 100-year effort that the West put into creating this fake new Arab, fake new Muslim that they invested in.
Interesting. I'm glad I learned, that I'm glad we have these kinds of parts of our conversation, because, people need to learn a lot philosophically about the civilization, about the region, and about how the people, the resistance, sees the struggle that they're in. Let me ask you this. We have reports of, the way they put it here, they traded fire. Hezbollah fired, and Israel launched a preemptive strike, which, as I kind of look at it, it was a preemptive strike that started after the other guy. So it was an odd form of preemption. I guess it was a late term preemption or something, whatever. But tell us, what do we know that happened?
Yeah, it's after-birth abortion. Yes, that's what it was. Look, the Israelis obviously noticed all the movement of the Hezbollah fighters the night of the retaliation. And as the retaliation began, Israel bombarded South Lebanon. It was the largest number of air raids since 2006. There was 40 different locations that were attacked in the south of Lebanon. But the Israelis were claiming that they had 100 jets up in the air that fired 1,000, on 1,000 targets and destroyed 1,000 rocket launchers, which is also all crazy talk. What really happened that night is that the Israelis were not able to stop Hezbollah's retaliation, and in fact, they were not able to hit one rocket launcher and or drone hangar where the drones were being fired from. So this is a huge failure on intelligence in terms of knowing beforehand, huge failure militarily and in intelligence during Hezbollah's attack, because they couldn't even fire on anything that was firing things at them. They couldn't, target those things. And Hezbollah's retaliation was clearly connected to the assassination of General Fuad Shukr, the commander-in-chief of Hezbollah's military wing. And so there was two main targets: the Glalin base, which is just outside Tel Aviv, which is the main base of the Israeli military intelligence, the Aman, and a air base, which now I blanked out on the name of it, which is halfway between Tel Aviv and the border of Lebanon. This is the main dispatch and control base where the Israeli Air Force is directed from. Those were the two main targets. They were hit by a wave of advanced drones. At the same time, Hezbollah fired 340 missiles and almost 100 drones that distracted and overwhelmed all the air defenses in the north of Palestine for the advanced drones to reach their two main targets in the center of occupied Palestine. And they hit, with that wave of missiles and drones, 11 bases in both the Golan Heights and the north of occupied Palestine. Up until now, the Israelis have a total media blackout instituted by law. No international media or local media is allowed to film the locations that were hit. And one last thing about Hezbollah's retaliation. We hear now that the rumors is that the head of the 8200 unit, this is one of the most important units within the Israeli military intelligence, and is the one that is draws out plans for assassinations and what have you. So the head of this 8200 unit, along with his deputy and the high up cadre of this unit, were all liquidated in the attack by Hezbollah. This is what we hear. And Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, in his speech the night of the day after the attack, he said he considers the score settled right now, except if the Israelis continue to claim that nothing of significance was hit, and that means then Hezbollah has to retaliate more, and or if the Israelis attack Lebanon, then they will retaliate. So where it is actually better, if for anybody that wants more punches to land on Israel, it's better that the Israelis keep on lying and say nobody died and no significant targets were hit. But if they're smart enough, they will actually tell us what the results of Hezbollah's response has been.
One of the things that I'm starting to realize, I've seen some attacks, and I'm sure you have too, where basically Hezbollah's fired on Israel, and Israel hasn't fired anything defensively. They've just taken the hits, right? And there are a lot of people that think their defenses are down. I don't think that's what it is. What do you think about this? One of the things that Hezbollah will do, they'll fire expensive missiles, but they'll fire these Katyusha rockets, which are cheap, hundreds of them, drones, which are cheap, hundreds of them. Now, in studying the various types of anti-missile systems, what you find is anti-missile systems generally, when the radar picks up a particular missile and the computer develops a firing solution, and it fires two missiles. It always has to fire two to ensure that it hits the target. That's the way the computer works. You got to fire two missiles. By overwhelming them with cheap missiles, the Israeli can't fire, because if they do, all you have to do, I think the Patriot makes 500 or 600 missiles a year or something stupid like that. A very, very low amount of capability that the U.S. can make for these missiles, so that if they keep firing at these small cheap missiles and drones, they'll just run out. So in a way, the Israelis are kind of naked against the smaller, cheaper stuff, because they'll just run out of missiles, and then they'll be hit with anything, and they have to kind of husband their resources for the larger missiles, which means half the time they're just naked for a hit because they can't technically defend themselves. 300 cheap missiles, guess what? That's 600 $2 million missiles, and they just can't afford. That's the neoliberalism of the military industrial complex has to make these real expensive things to make a lot of money. But when it comes to the battlefield, they put themselves in an obviously compromising position. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you're partially right there. Obviously, there is drones that the Israelis are not able to detect that are going through their system and they're hitting their targets. The Katyusha missiles we saw on the night of the retaliation, the Israelis freaked out, so they fired everything that they have to try to stop anything because they couldn't, with hundreds of things up in the area, they couldn't even tell what was what and where was it going. So they were just firing randomly, and we saw videos of tens of Iron Dome missiles just missing and their targets and hitting the ground. That's the other thing, is the more you fire, the more there is missiles that are going to come down because there's no target to hit. And the Israelis are already running out of their missiles for air defenses. They're getting very short on that. They've requested from the U.S., but the U.S. is also running low on its own storage, and it has that whole war in Ukraine that is drowning in, that it wants to send some of these air defenses there. So I think it's two things playing at the same time. One is this idea that they only once a big fight is happening, that they're firing as much as they can, as happened with the retaliation. The other is that Hezbollah is actually using enough advanced weapons that the Israelis have no capability of even noticing them in air. Like we're seeing on a daily basis, Hezbollah drones hitting targets deep inside Palestine with not one siren going off, let alone missiles trying to fight it back. So yeah, it's the end of the line for the might of Israel and the West behind them.
I get it. So there's a combination of factors. There's the limit in the number of missiles that they can defend with. And I also understand that a lot of the intelligence gathering happens, that things are fired to find out where the Iron Dome systems, the David Sling systems, and then those various systems are attacked once they turn on their radar and reveal themselves. Then there's technological issues. I watched a video of a Ansar Allah drone, single drone. It was loud, and they had a video, and it just came right into Tel Aviv and wham, and through what they consider a layered integrated air system. So I don't know if it was stealthy. Sometimes some of these things, what they do is they fly it's the route that they take. They fly in these low valleys and they navigate in areas where just basically they're under the radar and they can't be picked up until the last minute they come up and strike. So what we're seeing is, any way you look at it, Israel's in a losing situation. They just can't. To me, it's like a guy who's knocked out on his feet, like they hit somebody you ever watch a boxing match and some guy's on the ropes and the guy's just pummel him and finally the ref pulls him away because the guy's just out on his feet. And that's the way I see Israel. Your thoughts on this? The other thing too, you may be able to enlighten me. Internally, it seems like Israel's coming apart. It seems like it's on the verge of some kind of an internal severe conflict, civil war. I read that the military is screaming basically at the civilian leadership saying, we can't fight, we can't do this, we're running out of stuff, we're not made for this kind of fight. And the Netanyahu people are saying, pedal to the metal, go forward, let's continue to fight. Your thoughts on the internal conflicts and contradictions inside of occupied Palestine and how they affect this thing?
Yeah, there is definitely, for a while now, there's been almost a civil war inside Israel, and it's between the old Ashkenazi crowd that ruled Israel since its foundation, and this new emerging ultra-Orthodox religious Zionist. Okay, and remember, most of the European Zionists, beginning first settlers, were all secular. They believe God chose them, but they don't believe in God. And so we saw that how that played out now. With since the beginning of this war, Netanyahu has actually consolidated his hold with the help of these new religious Zionists that have now a majority, an absolute majority in the Knesset. He's been able to, the last holdout for this old Ashkenazi crowd in the Israeli structures were the Supreme Court and the military. And as we saw, since the beginning of this war, that helped, Netanyahu change actually the composition of the Supreme Court. Nobody now noticed that. And there's been now changes inside the military with him, taking out Galant and moving people in. Now we see how Ben Gvir and his effect on the police is changing the policing. And there's now full units and brigades within the Israeli military that are of the religious Zionists. So there's just a few at the top of the hierarchy of the military that are still, from this old Ashkenazi crowd, and they don't have the ability to do much. So there's no way anybody can dislodge Netanyahu from power through elections or media or courts. The only possibility of any change in Israel is really a military coup. Okay, and the window for that military coup is closing fast because of the forced retirements that Netanyahu and his regime are doing in the military and changing the whole structures in the military to make it impossible for his competition to have a say. And as we see, the only possible military kind of mutiny that was going to happen was last month when some military, raped 10 soldiers raped a Palestinian prisoner of war, and the military police was taking them to the court, and the military was going to riot and against the officers and the military police to have the right to rape prisoners of war. So in fact, the only possibility of a mutiny in Israel is for worse, not for the better.
The resistance, Syria, Iraq, etc. I also read that there were mumblings that if Israel, pushed it too far, that there was resistance in other countries that has not shown up yet, that has not got involved yet, that would be involved. What's the status? We see U.S. bases have been hit. The status of the resistance, Syria, Iraq, and other places. Before we get to Ansar Law, we'll get to them next.
Yeah, in Syria, I think looking at how Hezbollah has been targeting specifically the Golan Heights, and also the Iraqi drones have been crossing over Syria and over the Golan Heights. That shows you actually that there is ground prepared in Syria, in the south of Syria, for that front to be one of the most important fronts if there is a full-out war, which we're inching towards slowly. So, in the south of Syria, there's a lot of preparations for that. In the north of Syria, there's the continued clashes between the Arab tribes in Deir ez-Zor, my home province, and the Kurdish Contras backed by American military power. In fact, the Kurdish Contras almost were defeated just 2 weeks ago during these confrontations, and they had to run away and retreat to the American bases. And then the American Air Force and Apache helicopters, took reins of the situations and attacked the Arab villages around and attacked the rebels and to push them back. Without the Americans intervening, the Kurdish Contras would have been defeated in that one day. Okay. And now the US has installed, as we know, THAAD anti-air defense missiles, along with others, and they've been bringing hundreds of more troops in, scared about losing their bases in Syria, in northeast Syria. Yesterday, President Assad was speaking to the new parliament. We had parliamentary elections in Syria and the new session. And he spoke about the situation with Turkey. He said Turkey has to acknowledge that it harmed Syria and withdraw from all Syrian territory, and then we're ready to return to brotherly relations. And that's an indication of possible change with Turkey. I'm not sure Erdogan, if I can trust him or not, but the world is changing. Who knows where Erdogan can go? Yemen is continuing with its efforts. We saw them use these new drones that have actual missiles on the back of these surface drones, these boat drones. They use them against the Greek oil carrier that was sunk a few days ago. This is a huge advancements that we haven't seen anybody does that before. And finally, I want to say about Lebanon here. During the response from Hezbollah, they hit a ship, an Israeli warship. And that's now we have more proof that the drones of Hezbollah and the whole axis of resistance can hit moving military naval targets, which means for sure Yemen has been successful, and the U.S. has been lying for all this whole war about the attacks on their ships in the Red Sea.
What are your thoughts on what's going on? Any thoughts on what's happening in Libya right now?
I'm sorry, you cut off a little bit there.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Oh, any thoughts on what's going on in Libya right now? It seems like the U.S. is trying to stir up some issues there. I think their whole move in Libya is that the Russians have a strong foothold and they want to get the Russians out of Libya and it's getting harder for them to marshal their ISIS fighters and train them and have a place for them. With the resistance all over the place, it seems to me that they maybe want Libya to be that place.
Yes, of course. Libya and the war in Libya and the continued chaos in Libya helps the West siphon off all the oil and gas. And at the same time, it's a annoyance and a hazard for both Egypt and Algeria, the two most important Arabic states in Africa. So as long as there's this chaos in Libya, Algeria has to always watch its border. Egypt has to do the same. Of course, we can see how the situation in Libya is affecting Sudan. We know all the weapons that the Emiratis are smuggling into Sudan, for instance, are coming through Libya. And that means you need, more chaos in Libya to make it even more easier for the weapons to get into Sudan. I wonder now for a while why Algeria doesn't just enter Libya and liberate it and end this story. It will really help the whole region. But it's a sad situation. Libya was one of the richest countries in the world. The population had everything that it needed, but now they are, one of the poorest nations on this planet.
Recently, he might have some thoughts on this. MBS mentioned that he felt that his life was in danger. Are you familiar with that statement? What do you think about what are your thoughts on that statement? Let people know what the statement was, the context of it, and then what's your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I mean, it's I don't trust American newspapers. I think it was in the New York Times or the Washington Post, one of these two rags, and they claim that MBS told the Americans that he wants to normalize relations with the Zionists, but he's scared for his life that he could be killed. Obviously, this is uh, it's more likely that he will be killed by the Israelis and the Americans because he's taking too much space. He thinks of himself too highly, and that's a danger for even a puppet of the West. There's not much that can be done, really. I wish that there's somebody in Saudi Arabia that has the guts to take him out or take out the whole Saud family and end that reign. But there isn't. At this moment, I don't see that happening. Of course, the lives of citizens of Saudi Arabia that are speaking on behalf in support of Palestine are more in danger. We see the hundreds of people that are arrested in the eastern coast of Saudi, where the Shia population is. They had a few demonstrations over the last 6 months. The population there, and they got beaten up badly, and their youth disappeared and have been executed. So no, this was, I think, just a propaganda piece floated in the West to kind of make the people feel that, oh well, the Saudis really want normalization with Israel, but those bad Arabs, they want to kill our friend MBS, and probably they're now put him more in danger. If there's any danger now for him to be killed, it's because of what this newspaper published.
Yeah, as soon as I read that, my first thought was, well, his life's not in danger from if anything happens to him, it'll be the CIA. They could look. I'd be worried if I were MBS, because oftentimes that's the kind of wing thing they'll write. They'll be like, yeah, there could be really bad guys and that are out to get Garland Nixon. We wouldn't want anything to happen. It's like the mafia saying, we wouldn't want anything to happen to you, Garland. That means they're planning to kill you. And when they're like, yeah, we really wouldn't want anything to happen to MBS. We understand there's been threats on his life. Yeah, there may. In fact, you could interpret that article as a threat on his life. If he's smart, he better be, watching his P's and Q's and hiding it, because I would say they're setting up the story so they can say, yeah, there's threats on his life. And then when something happens to him, well, we kind of knew he was in trouble, but now that he's gone, perhaps we can put some Ben Gavir and Smotrich in charge of Saudi Arabia now. Straighten this thing out once and for all. Question. So yeah, he better watch his back. Let's just say that article was a shot across his bow, both literally and figuratively. Your thoughts on Richard Medhurst? He's a guy and he's covering everything and he's showing videos or what have you. I've watched a lot of his videos, and it's clear what position he's taken, but it's certainly legal. I haven't seen or heard anything from him that I would say, well, he's crossing the line into illegality whatsoever. He goes to Heathrow Airport, they nab him, and after pushing back against the terrorism law, they grab him and say he's violating the terrorism law. The guy that runs
Telegram,
they grab this guy. The Facebook guy comes out and says, perhaps I shouldn't have hidden the Hunter Biden story. Your thoughts on the state of affairs as far as the desperation of the empire. That's what I see when I see them pushing down stories. I see the desperation of the empire. Your thoughts?
Oh yeah, Richard is a friend of mine. His father is British white. His mother is Syrian, and he's been very vocal and very successful, I think, in sending the message out to a public. He has hundreds of thousands of followers. So I think this is what scared them, because he's Christian, he's white, he's also Arab, he's also Syrian. So he's able to cross all these cultural lines and unite people and he's young. Maybe I'm old. I don't appeal to a certain group. So he's able to mobilize people. And his parents were both UN workers. Okay, so he comes from a family of diplomats, and he lives in Geneva, and he was going back home to the UK, and they nab him, and they did what they did. I personally think that Richard should leave the West, because we can see right now what they did with Assange. I don't wish for him to have to go through that. The CEO of Telegram, maybe some of our viewers don't know, but Telegram is used around the world because it's not American. It's a communication. You can make calls, you can send messages, but you can also do groups and share news. It is also where all the resistance
Faith froze. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to remove him, and hopefully he'll come back on. We'll try to sign him out. Okay, so what I do is I'm going to kick him from the studio, and then I'm going to ask him to sign back in, and hopefully that'll work. Sign back. I'm going to send him an email and tell him to sign back in. Now, that being said, that's not to say that this was an accident. I'm hoping everything's okay there. That's not to say this was an accident. I wouldn't be shocked if there was nefarious characters involved that were tossing him in the studio. But I did kick him from the studio, and I sent something to say sign back in. So we'll see what happens with dear Laith Maroof. How these things go. But let's continue on. Oh, there we go. I see him coming back. Let's see how this works. Can
Yeah,
you
I
hear
don't
me?
know what happened. Yeah, I don't
Oh,
have
well,
no
we're
idea
good.
what
Hey,
happened
look, I
there.
always say the guys over in Langley, the CIA, they got to earn a living too. They
I
got to
know, and
eat.
we were touching up on their latest attacks on people's rights, so they were not happy with that. So yeah, the Telegram carries all these channels. You can get all this information from them, and at the beginning of the Ukraine war, Telegram and the owner of Telegram, who's a Russian citizen, refused to follow the orders of the Russian courts that wanted to, have access to some of the personal information of individuals that were accused of terrorist attacks inside Russia. And he decided to leave Russia. And Telegram was banned in Russia because of that. And then he got a citizenship in France and citizenship in the United Arab Emirates. And lo and behold, the minute that Israel complained, and that's the whole story, Israel was complaining about a huge dump of information. Somebody hacked Israeli databases and was starting to dump them on Telegram, including all this information about high-ranking military officers that are all secret, their information. And so Israel complained, and the owner of Telegram said, I'm not going to stop anybody. It's freedom of speech. And here we have, he went and got French citizenship only to be nabbed by the French. I think he was safer in Russia, probably, under even that court situation than what he is right now. And he's going to have to give the back keys to the West. Otherwise, he's gonna be disappeared like Assange. And this takes us to Rumble. The owner of Rumble also fled right now Europe because he's probably the next target. Is the only platform that is competing with YouTube and is allowing videos like ours here to air on their channel. The West is deleting all these fake rights that they had for their citizenship, their citizens. One last thing I would say here is that look at what's happening in France since the election. The left coalition won the most seats, and they're supposed to form a government. But it's now 2 months that Macron is refusing to allow a new government to come into power. So he's governing without the parliament. He's governing without consent of the population. And in fact, I was just reading half an hour ago, Macron has been talking to Marine Le Pen from the ultra-right to make her the prime minister. She didn't win the election. So even this idea of democracy in the birthplace of Western democracy in France is ending right now. This whole experiment is going to be over.
Let me show you something. Here's another example. Though I'm not, a friend or, or whatever, supporting, either of the parties, JD, now we've got this at the same time. I think this is JD Vance has literally invested in neo-Nazi and Russian propaganda. And what they say is, oh, he allows he allows RT, et cetera, to be on Rumble. Therefore, Russian propaganda. If I look at what's going, I say to myself, and I think Peter Thiel's the other guy with him, I really believe to myself that if Harris wins, they'll crack down in the same way that they're doing Telegram. That was also a message. And Musk and these other people will likely be arrested. Because they're not going to, if they win, they're going to feel we can do anything we want. We'll likely be arrested. I think Twitter, Telegram, Twitter, all of them will be seized, taken over, whatever, dominated. And I think they'll go after Vance. I think some of these people, look, like I said, look at the kind of people they're arresting. For God's sake, they arrested, and charged Trump. I think that there will be a move to annihilate the platforms now that allow people like us a major crackdown and arrest. Do you think I'm out over my skis and suspecting something like that's coming?
No, it is coming. And the bigger this war in this region is, the more rights you will have to lose, and the more people that are going to be jailed and put in concentration camps. Look, yesterday there was a Palestinian that was lynched and hung from a tree in Belgium. Okay, so strange fruits in the trees of Belgium right now. This is where we're getting at. The Zionists around the world are watching that, seeing that the media is allowing them to do whatever they want to with a Palestinian. The West elite is letting them do whatever they want to with a Palestinian inside Palestine. Why not outside Palestine? If 100 and almost 200 Palestinian journalists can be killed in Palestine, why can't they be killed outside Palestine, right? If doctors can be killed in Palestine, why can't they be killed outside Palestine? We're getting to that point. It's becoming normalized, because 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, 100 times, it becomes the norm. And if it's a norm in one place with the backing of the whole Western Empire, that's going to be the norm inside the empire. People should probably mentally get themselves ready for that, and physically be ready to resist. It's not a joke. I know I may have made the call early on in in our interviews over 6 months ago. I was saying, this is coming, guys. There's going to be concentration camps for Arabs, Muslims, and anybody that supports the rights of Palestinians in the West. This is coming. It's inching towards it. And from now till November, the election in the US, a question: is it going to happen, even the election, especially if this war breaks out fully? We could see the example of France, how France is rejecting the results of democracy in order to maintain its imperial power. And so, what will happen in the US if there's a full out war here in the region? Will there be an election? Let's say uh, Trump wins. Well, if France can choose not to allow the left to appoint a prime minister, why wouldn't the US have the right not to allow Trump to become president, even if he wins? Okay, so those are not anymore in the imaginary realm. These possibilities, these are real, true possibilities that could happen.
If you could also comment on, because I did a video the other day where I said Ukraine and Israel, it's one war. It's not two wars. This is imperialism, and it's U.S. imperialism saying, we run the world, we can do what we want, nobody has any say, and we're going to go to the Muslim world, and we're going to show the people in the region that we dominate. We're going to go to Russia's border. We're going to teach them that we dominate. China's border, teach them that they dominate. The desperation in the and foolishness, the invasion into Kursk. Okay, they get a public relations victory, if that's a victory in war. But ultimately, like, the soldiers get all killed and things are, they basically, what they did was they stuck all of their reserves out in the middle so the Russians could kill them all. And so they get a PR victory, but it seems to me that it's only going to hasten the ultimate loss on the battlefield. Your thoughts on the Ukraine conflict, if you have any?
Yeah, I mean, this attack on the Kursk region in Russia clearly was intended as you said, a propaganda ploy. But at the same time, if you notice, they attacked the nuclear reactor in Kursk. And this is where it's connected to Palestine and what's happening here. The West has been goading Putin and to use nuclear weapons. They keep on poking him and Belarus to try to get them to use nuclear weapons. Why? So they can have the excuse to use nuclear weapons here in West Asia. Israel is already defeated militarily, economically, propaganda-wise. The whole world hates Israel right now. Okay, there's no coming back. If the war stops right now, Israel will collapse on its own. Okay, and nobody is going to do business with them. There's no return to the old days of how Israel normally existing in the world. So the only thing that can stop the assured and imminent end of the Zionist colony is the use of nuclear weapons. And the West does not want to use nuclear weapons as the first person to do it since World War II, since they did it then. They want Russia to do it so they can have an excuse to eradicate people in the region here, to ethnically cleanse the Palestinian people, to the Lebanese, whatever, by using tactical nukes. And I think Russia is holding itself back, knowing that the whole trap is about that. It's not even about Russia. They don't dare use nuclear weapons against Russia. They want to have the right to use nuclear weapons in other parts of the world, and they don't want to look like the first ones to use it. So they're guarding Russia and pushing its buttons to try to get it to make the mistake of using nuclear weapons.
Let me ask you this. Iran, the response. There are a lot of people some like, oh, why haven't they responded yet? And blah, blah, blah. And it is my experience in dealing and looking at Iran and looking at Russia that these are very, very old civilizations. And the U.S. is kind of like, if this happens, you got to do this right away. If this happens, you got to show that you're strong. If this happens, you got to act right away. And with an Iran and Russia, it seems to me that they tend to think out their strategies and wait they're very patient and wait for the opportune time to act in the way that they want to act. It seems to me that what Iran is doing is wise. They've got other things going on, and they don't have to just punch back right now. I think they understand it is a provocation, and that that's what the Israelis see as their only way out. They've lost the war. They're going down for the third time, and their only hope is to drag the U.S. in, to get Iran to respond and drag the U.S. in, and blah, blah, blah. And I think the Iranians understand that. But what are your thoughts on the reasonings for Iran doing or not doing whatever they're doing right now?
So on the one hand, Iran, there's a proverb there that says Iranians slaughter somebody with a cotton ball. Okay, so they keep on rubbing until they get to the bone. Okay, this is how they kill you. Okay, with a cotton ball, and so that is carries over to their military strategies. But on the second thing that we can say about this is that when you are fighting a war with a much stronger enemy that has limitless resources like the United States empire, and you're just the Palestinians or Lebanon or Iran facing off the whole West, well, it doesn't make sense to have a full-out war. It will mean destruction of your population and your infrastructure and so on. It's better off if you do a war of attrition that is long. And, I think we will have the regional war. There's no running away from it, okay? But it's how long it's gonna, and how many stages, and how fast Netanyahu wants to go there as fast as possible. Iran and Hezbollah and the Axis of Resistance want to drag this as long as possible before we reach that point, to deplete as much as possible of the weapons and resources that the West and Israel has before a full-out war breaks out. And this is why we saw these assassinations by Israel were actually provocations, trying to, again, draw Hezbollah and or Iran into a full-out war. The third thing I would say is that because it took almost a month for Hezbollah to respond, that meant that the whole West had all its military assets, its intelligence, its satellites all directed to this region for a month, spending their money, everybody on high alert, everybody's getting double pay, everybody's, and similarly, the Israelis had to put a lot of resources into expecting the attack. Now, we add to it the Iranians. I don't know when they're going to respond. It's also dragging that out. It's putting a lot of stress on Western economies as a whole. It's putting a lot of stress on all the propaganda machine of the West, which is all now pumping 24 hours content about what's happening in the region. So it works really well, this idea that when you're fighting against a much more resourced enemy, a decolonization war, to drag it as a war of attrition than a full-out war where you could get slaughtered all at once.
It makes sense, because what I see is this. The real, I read the Democrats' platform, and it was the neocon platform, but in there you saw the reality. They said Russia, Iran, North Korea, China, they're attacking freedom by military sales and economic partnerships, right? So they're scared that people want to buy. Now, my understanding is everybody around the world is trying to buy Iranian drones, right? And Russian stuff, because it works. Okay. So you've got the military industrial complex upset because their stuff is all burning and falling down and being not working, both in occupied Palestine and Ukraine. And the other stuff that's number one, but economic partnerships, BRICS, that October, there's a big BRICS meeting. Iran, some areas of the resistance have, and Syria potentially in the future can be a big part of a new world order. And I think they understand one of the things that the empire would like to have is a war in the region so they could disrupt BRICS. so they could really have their war on BRICS. They're horrified of what's happening with BRICS, horrified of economic power moving to the global south, which now seems inevitable. And I think part of it, as soon as they attacked, apparently the Russians came in with very, very high tech defensive system. I think part of that is the Russians coming in saying, look, we got this BRICS things going. Let's not screw it up. We'll help you defend yourself if they want to attack. We'll help you defend, you know what I mean? But don't go out and do something. They're trying to me, the other thing is they're going to do more as we get close to October, because they want to attack and disrupt BRICS, because that's the big fear that they have. It's all about economics in the end to the U.S. empire. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, BRICS just invited Palestine to the meeting in October, which, shows you where the game is being played. The Iranian drones have been just shown in North Korea. So even North Korea is buying these drones, and there's I think close to 60,000 American soldiers in South Korea. So here the Iran may get its revenge somewhere else by somebody else using its drones. The truth of the matter is, the whole world is buying from China, from Iran, from Russia. It is the Western economies that are going down on less and less trade, going to Africa and Latin America from the United States and from Europe. And part of why the U.S. would maybe be okay with a full-out regional war in West Asia is that the U.S. has its own sufficiency and resources, and it wants to disrupt the delivery of Chinese products to the rest of the world. If you have an all-out war in Western Asia, that disrupts all trade from East Asia to the rest of the world. And the United States would be happy with that. The United States would be happy to enter as the option, replacement option to Europe and to Africa of products. And so I think the Iranians and the Chinese and the Russians and all BRICS are trying their best not to allow a full-out war to break out, not because they don't want to save the Palestinians, but they want a way to do that does not affect the whole planet. The Zionists and their masters behind them want to drag us all into this hell that they're building.
I think it comes down to this, and I think it's been masterful, that the resistance has controlled the escalation, that they understood there would be escalations, and they understand there would be provocations. But as long as the resistance controls the level of escalation, they win. Because it's like, kind of, again, I get back to boxing. If you've got two people with two different styles, whoever forces the other fighter to fight his style is going to win. And the resistance basically is looking at it saying, you can do provocations. Nah, we're going to not react to that. Okay, you know what? We're going to pay you back for that one, but not this one. We're only going to do it this way. And to me, what I see is the U.S. empire and the Zionists, they have to constantly wait back to see what the resistance is going to do next, to how they're going to act. So the resistance is in control of the escalatory ladder, is in control of the retaliations, all of those kind of things. And as long as they do that, they're winning the conflict.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And the Western audience has been trained by the elite in the West over the last 30 years that to show the successes of the West is shock and awe and assassination. Shock and awe and assassination. But this is not how you fight wars of decolonization. Our audience here wants to see the end of a genocide. They're not thirsty for genocide. You see, the difference is people around the world want freedom. They don't want revenge. It's not the priority of us. It's not the priority to look we have the biggest explosion. We've killed the biggest honcho. That's not how human wars are fought. That's how animals fight. Okay, and the West is actually ruining its own reputation uh, by allowing the Zionists to do what they do. Although what Israel is doing, the U.S. already did in Iraq and Afghanistan. But even the U.S. was not that braggy about raping people in Abu Ghraib. You know, the Israelis are raping people and celebrating it in the streets and sending it on Telegram and showing everybody. I mean, even those soldiers in Abu Ghraib that didn't really end up in jail, but they got dragged to a prosecution. Uh, you didn't see American soldiers rioting to defend those right of the soldiers to rape prisoners in Abu Ghraib. Now we're seeing. So this is where I think the world is changing. People are choosing different paths than what we're being told are the only paths to be. To be a successful nation, you have to be a colonizer that genocides and loots others. That's China showed us that you don't have to be that. To be a strong nation that is sovereign, you have to bombard a whole continent. We're seeing that from Iran and from Hezbollah and even from the Palestinians on the ground, that you don't have to be that to be sovereign. So a new world is being birthed and a new image of humanity is coming out, and hopefully this genocide will end soon, so we can all be celebrating.
Laith Maroof, once again, everybody, freepalestine.video. That's the website. Laith and his crew are doing great work. What they're doing is they're covering the conflict. They're covering the region on the ground. They're doing very dangerous things. They're going to locations where there have been attacks, where there are potential attacks. As I said, it's very dangerous. And they're doing English language stuff, getting it out of the region so people like us can see what's actually going on there, unfiltered by the corporate media. Freepalestine.video is the website. Please go to freepalestine.video and support, donate. You can become a monthly supporter. That's great. Also, whether you can, even if you can't afford it, a lot of people can't, doesn't matter whether you can or can't afford it, make sure you share freepalestine.video on all of your social media platforms. And when you post it, make sure you put that little note that says, please go here and donate and become a monthly supporter. Thanks a lot. That's something that you could do. There's a lot of people here that are frustrated. They're upset. Darn, I wish I could do something. I wish there was some way I could act. Well, you know what? That is a way that you can act. There is something you can do. Freepalestine.video. Thank you very much. Laith, thank you very much. And we'll talk again soon.
Thank you.